would like to suggest two practices that you may want to enter into during Advent, using the familiar first chapter of Luke, where we find the Annunciation and the Visitation Gospels. And you have copies on at your place. But I invite you to see these stories in a new way. The first practice is to pay attention to the stirrings of the Holy Spirit within yourself, within your family, your community, wherever you may be, as you connect the gospel with your own experience. The second practice is that of hospitality, or the welcoming of one another. The welcoming of all, realizing we are not separate. These themes, stirrings and hospitality, appear in the Annunciation and Visitation stories and can help us reflect on our lives. The Holy Spirit, we don't usually think of the Holy Spirit in Advent, more so toward Pentecost, but the Holy Spirit is mentioned in that first chapter of Luke. The angel Gabriel tells Mary, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. And when Mary visits her pregnant older cousin Elizabeth, Elizabeth is filled with the Holy Spirit. So in this holy season, we prepare our hearts for the stirrings of the Holy Spirit. Advent is a quiet time, and the Church encourages us to seek silence and contemplation. In the midst of all the cultural excess of visual and auditory stimuli, the Church does invite us to that quiet and that balance and that time of reflection and action. So let's look at the Annunciation first. And I'm going to ask that maybe the lights be maybe out there a little bit more, and get rid of this one here if we could, just so the image will show up. I don't know if that works or not, so I have to be able to see my paper. So this is a familiar Annunciation, many of you probably know. This is by Henry O. Tanner, that's perfect, who was the first American painter. We'll have a little art history as we go along here. He was the first African-American painter to be internationally recognized. He was from Pennsylvania and studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, but he studied also in Paris, where he was really accepted more there. And he won international acclaim for his landscapes and also his treatment for biblical themes. Now, I think the painting can just help us see in a visible, concrete way the stirrings of the Holy Spirit in Mary and in ourselves. So there's kind of a movement or a process here of Mary's stirrings, and perhaps the way the Spirit stirs in us. Mary senses something. So there's a sensing there. You can call that a stirring. The angel in the form of light. I like the non-literal representation of the angel here. There is awareness of something stirring within her, in the center point of her being. And it seems that Mary is open to listening. So that's the first thing that happens. This awareness brings up feelings. Fear, confusion. The angel says, "Greetings to you, Mary, O favored one. The Lord is with you." Certainly, this stirs up feelings in Mary. And then the message is heard. You will give birth to a son, Jesus. There's the questioning of the message. How can this be? Or we might say to ourselves, I'm just making this up in my head. This is not really stirring within me. Then there's reassurance. The Holy Spirit will come. The child will be holy And your cousin Elizabeth is also with child. So Mary is beginning to feel that reassurance. And then the wholehearted acceptance of the message, a coming to peace. This is what happens within us too. There is that stirring, and we go through the feelings and the awareness and perhaps the reassurance from others, and then the coming to peace. So, it kind of goes like this: the appearance of an angel or messenger, or a sensing of something. Again, this is for us too, in our own stirrings. The awareness of the stirrings and of the feelings. The realization of what the message really is. An objection maybe to the message, or questioning. How can this be? Is this really, is this me, or is this the Holy Spirit? A promise or a sense of reassurance and a wholehearted acceptance of the message. In my own experience, it has to do with my religious vocation, actually. At one time I had left the Dominican Sisters searching for my place in life, and I always liked poetry and read poetry. And once when I was in a bookstore, I came across a poem by the Persian poet Rumi. And a line stood out for me as I read, "Be still, a sublime generosity is coming toward you." Be still, a sublime generosity is coming toward you. Of course, I wondered what that was. I wrote the line down on an envelope that I had with me, and when I got home, I tore the little piece of paper off the envelope, and the scrap was on my desk and would emerge every now and then from underneath the piles of paper. So I continued to wonder what it meant. What was this sublime generosity? Was it simply the gifts and blessings of each day? I tried to be still and listen. Finally, I realized that after my father had died and my responsibility for him was lifted, the sublime generosity coming toward me was a call to return to religious life. Now this stirring occurred over a period of time, even a couple of years. But of course, stirrings can last for several years, or they can be very short stirrings. They can last for minutes or hours or days. There may be an external sign or not, just an inner sense. Stirrings are often about decisions, even small ones. They may be a sort of call, or something about a relationship, about children, grandchildren. Stirrings are about our everyday lives, aren't they? And about God's presence in our everyday lives. So Mary receives this difficult call. She seems dazed and confused, and Tanner aptly captures that, I think. She tests the call and the stirrings of the Spirit by questioning and by pondering. She's really taken to another layer in her life, into something larger, and even into a new identity. A peasant young woman is favored by God. Of course, this is unusual in a culture where women are really at the bottom of the ladder. The feelings of fear or the confusion or wondering are often what we might bring into our prayer. Because that's what prayer is, bringing ourselves before God. Not just saying words or formulas, but really bringing ourselves before God. And if we let the feelings come up and stay with them, we experience an honesty and a transparency before God. then we may be led to a deeper awareness of God's presence and a sense of being taken by the Spirit to a new place, a deeper place beyond the present moment. You may be familiar with the author Kathleen Norris. And in her book on Mary, she reflects on what it might be to be overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, a word used in some of the translations. She wonders if a kind of overshadowing isn't what every young woman, pregnant for the first time, might feel, caught up in something much larger than herself. She says that Mary's decision really takes her beyond that moment, far beyond that moment. Her yes response takes the decision into the whole of Jesus' life, into his death, and across the breadth of centuries to where we are now. It connects us. Her yes connects us with her, even now. We still feel the effects of her decision. This is true in our own lives. Our decisions have effects that outlast the moment of deciding. Thomas Merton talks about the center place within us. And Mary certainly has a conversation with the Spirit at this place of center within her. He calls it the point Vierge, V-I-E-R-G-E, where we meet God at the center of our being. And Merton says this is the place of absolute poverty, kind of the place of letting go. He also calls it a place of the pure glory of God. And Mary, during this time of stirrings, seems to be at this point of absolute poverty, or also that point of vulnerability. She is open to the Spirit's presence in the stirrings and is invited to share in God's work. The process Mary goes through is one we might consider for our Advent practice, that of reflection on our lives, especially on how we might create space and quiet for prayer during Advent and listen to those stirrings. Come, Holy Spirit, fill our hearts, open us to your stirrings. At this point, I'd like you to just we'll take about 3 minutes so you can quietly reflect on the questions. You have a page called Reflection Questions. Under the Annunciation, you have the gospel stories there too, but you have questions that relate to your experience. In what recent experience have I sensed or felt the stirrings of the Holy Spirit? Can you name and describe that experience? And you may want to pick one of these questions, not try to do all of them, of course. Do I sense an invitation or call from God in that stirring? Can I be with that stirring and let it go deeper? To what or whom am I called to say yes? And then, appropriate for Advent, what are some stirrings in our culture that challenge me to say yes or no. So please take some time to reflect on one of those questions. And then I'll ring the chime, and then it will be time to share at your tables. And we'll see how long. You can share with one other person if you want, or two others, or the whole table, whatever works for your group. Okay? So we'll have quiet time.